Hello, my name is Taylor Coyne.
My name is James Cook. We both research retail and real estate for JLL.
This is everything we know about retail.
The show where we tell you everything we know about retail, 3 things at a time.
James?
Yes.
What do you know about retail this week?
Well, I know that theater chains are holding out big hopes for summer 2021.
Aren't we all?
Yeah. The world is holding out big hopes for summer 2021. Taylor, what do you know about retail?
I know how some of our direct-to-consumer brands have changed since the pandemic and where we might be going from here.
Oh, interesting. Let's get into it. Tell me all about our DTC darlings. First off, for those uninitiated, explain what direct-to-consumer brands are.
Perfect. So actually, for those who tuned in last week, you'd first of all, too, got to give you a lot of credit for our new intro. Thank goodness we did fun things before the pandemic to have.
I know, right? Footage. Yeah, because we wouldn't be creating that video right now. It'd just be me sitting at home sipping coffee by myself.
Yeah, speaking of, for those again who tuned in last week, shout out to Keisha. Big Mug has returned. It might be a new part of this show. I'm sorry, I digress. So D2C brands, direct to consumer brands. So think of the one that everyone knows, Warby Parker. Started online, shipped directly to you. Generally, it's a little bit about cost savings too, right? We cut out this middleman, so you're getting these products directly from us at a lower cost. Now we're saturated with a ton of them. I'm in LA, so Abbott Kinney generally has like the most of them. But they've really blown up in recent years. I would say since probably like the past 5 years. Again, you hear of the Warby Parker, who's really kind of expanded into their, physical footprint. And that's really been the trend that we've been seeing in the last couple of years as well, of they're just opening up so many more physical stores. Poor retail. We're always going through some kind of retail apocalypse, right? That's been the story, the retail apocalypse. But could Clicks to Bricks brands save it? Because the whole idea was, they started online. At the start of Warby Parker, you placed your order for those glasses online and they didn't have a store. But slowly you've started seeing them open more and more stores because we have all realized there's a value in that physical store. So that's your Cliff's Notes version of D2C, also known as Clicks to Bricks. And again, the reason I brought up the intro is from last week, Showfields. We're getting some of these marketplaces. If anyone's been to Showfields, they have a lot of D2C brands to showcase all of these new brands.
So when we use the term D2C darlings, these are the direct consumer brands that were really high profile. Like a lot of people knew about them. Casper mattress, for example. Like it feels like for a while there, you couldn't listen to a podcast without hearing a Casper commercial.
Part of me thinks that's still kind of true, right? The darlings, right? You're right. Casper, Away, Everlane, Outdoor Voices, Third Love. The list goes on. But Bonobos, I feel like, for all the men out there who get their shirts and things.
So what's up? Like, how are those guys doing? I feel like a brand like Casper, this is the perfect, they do mail order mattresses. The gimmick is isn't the gimmick it's like a tiny box and when you open it a big mattress pops out. So seems like a perfect product for a millennial stuck at home shopper. How are they doing?
So not great. But and that's actually what I kind of wanted to talk about it today, because they just reported their quarterly numbers and they reported negative revenue. Their direct consumer revenue decreased 11.4%. And also for those who've been following the D2C story, Casper had there's been a lot of talk of, they IPO'd this year and it was just very disappointing. basically the idea of that VC funding is overvaluing a lot of these companies and they're not actually making any money. So again, this is kind of just another piece of this story. But interestingly, to your point of why Casper hasn't been doing well, because you'd think they are. We all know home goods are doing very well because we're at home and we all are, can't travel. And if you're lucky enough to still have your job, you're not spending it on travel. So you might as well buy things for your home. But they actually blamed a lot of their revenue issues on supply chain, that a few of their marquee products were just not available and they sold out and they weren't able to fulfill a lot of orders, which I actually thought was really interesting and something we've heard from other retailers too. On both sides of those, supply chains are getting messed up, but at the same time, we have too much inventory, depending on who you are, mostly apparel. But I just thought that was kind of like a really interesting intro to what's up with Clicks to Bricks brands, because I was also on a really interesting panel last week as D2C, brands are gearing up for the holidays and what people are trying to do, and how you do stay afloat in all of this, because I think D2C brands in particular, we're always a little hesitant about opening up stores. And then the pandemic hits and all your stores are closed. And you're like, what's the point of real estate in the first place? This is a disaster. What are we going to do? So, I was on this panel and a couple of, one of them was Hatch. I don't know if you're familiar. It's a maternity wear line. They were talking about how they've kind of had to pivot because even as some stores reopen, you're having this issue of, because you are dealing with pregnant women, a lot of them are hesitant. That's a group that's not supposed to go out and about. So how have they kind of pivoted and allowed you to come to the store? Because you can't do everything online, especially for pregnant women. You're constantly changing. And how do you know what size you are and what fits and what works? So it's just been really interesting to hear how a lot of these brands have kind of pivoted into how you solve for some of these issues. One of them is also what Hatch did, was partner with Leap, who you've done a podcast with, or a panel, both?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, and we'll plug this at the end, but Rebecca Fitz at Leap is going to be on a panel that I'm moderating for the Center Build conference that's coming up here in a few weeks. But yeah, they've been on the Where We Buy podcast as well, and they're like a turnkey real estate solution for a digital native brand. Like, you might be great at running a website that sells things, but you've never opened a store before, and they take care of all of that for you. So it's a great service,
which I think is great. So during the pandemic, they've opened a couple of pop-up stores for some of these brands. Hatch was actually one of them, to get rid of some excess inventory. And I thought that was so great. You're struggling with your stores and what do you do, but you can really kind of outsource some of this, and it's still a good touch point for, you to kind of interact with other people. Leap did this with a couple of other brands, just some short-term pop-ups, to get those brands out there. And I thought that was a really great idea. So it is, it's good to see, I think, like so many retailers, I think some of them are going to be afraid of real estate, but it's really cool to hear how some think that this is still absolutely part of their strategy going forward.
So any thoughts on what the future real estate strategy is? So we know, like, from our past research, there's been a big focus on like the hot prime urban corridors in cities, because you want to get, international travelers to see your store and think of your brand, and, get lots of foot traffic. There's not much foot traffic in the cities right now. So is there a switch? Is there an idea that maybe they focus on, nicer suburban malls, or even suburban, like, outdoor locations?
Yep. I think like anyone else, like all of these retailers, the focus is on suburban. We feel safer. There's more space. So yeah. And especially, you can get some really great deals now too. So I think people feel a little bit more flexible on where they're going to go. And also a lot of the population is now in the suburbs, whether that's permanent or temporary. So you can do short-term leases, which is a popular strategy for D2C brands also, just because they're not ready to make that kind of commitment. So I think you're going to see a lot more suburbs. And I also think we're going to see a lot more wholesale partnerships. So even before the pandemic, of the brands that we track, 60% of them are already sold through some kind of wholesale channel. But I think that that's going to be even more popular going forward. And obviously, all of these different channels, I mean, maybe outside of like, your mass merchandisers, your Target, who often partners with a lot of cosmetics or, some of those like shave companies, etc. But I think we're going to see a lot more of those just because it's a great opportunity to grow, and expand all of your sales through different channels. So I think that that's going to be another key thing too. So I think we're going to see them going into markets that maybe we wouldn't have thought before. And you're also going to start seeing them available in different places than just their website or in just their store.
So a market might be like I don't know, like a dense suburban Atlanta, or I don't know, like Austin, someplace that's suburban, but it's still got some level of density and sort of, people around.
Yeah, I think Texas, like a lot of those Texas markets too, that just have a little bit more of a suburban feel. I think that's going to be, big too. I think too, and just one kind of plug for the urban corridors is the ones that are in neighborhoods. First of all, I think there's always going to be interest for all of these places. Short term, though, I think it's going to be less your Times Square, your Michigan Ave, unless you're a real well-capitalized brand who can do those things. I think you're going to focus on just where the people are, where people are living. It's less about tourist destinations and where people work for now. Like you said, we're all waiting until summer 2021, fall, whatever. Fingers crossed.
Absolutely.
So speaking of summer 2021, tell me what's up with movie theaters? That's also a little sad.
Well, Taylor, movie theaters are a change in a lot of different ways. And, one of the most interesting things that's just being reported on now, this was a piece in the Wall Street Journal today. Do you know about the movie theater windows? Like, how long a movie's in the theater before you can see it on video or on video on demand?
It's funny, I was just listening to this on NPR yesterday. There's something, if it does well, you have to guarantee like 4 weekends or something like that. If it does extraordinarily well, then you get 2 extra weekends or something like that. I'm sure there's more of a science than what I just said.
Yeah, so there's a new agreement. Universal has just done new agreements between AMC, which is our biggest chain, and Cinemark, which owns Regal, which is our second biggest chain in the US. And they've come to a new agreement over on what these windows should be. But do you have a sense of, like, back before COVID, like how long was that window? Because sometimes it felt like movies took forever to get to video, and then sometimes it felt like, it seems like, wait, didn't that just come out in theaters and it's already on video?
Yes, and there was definitely no rhyme or reason. I'd be like, when's this coming out? When can I rent it? I miss seeing it in the theater. And it's like, if I looked that up in January, it'd be like April.
Right. Well, a lot of it has to do with how well a movie's doing in the theater. And if it's doing well, you're going to make more money from selling a theater ticket, which is like, how much are movie tickets now? It could be like $15 easy, right?
I was gonna say 20. So
yeah, well, you live in LA.
True.
I could probably do a $7 matinee here in Indiana, but anyway, so you make a lot more money at a theater selling theater tickets than you do like streaming it on, like selling it to Netflix or selling it video on demand. So as long as people are seeing it in the theater, you don't want to compete with that. So it used to be, I would say on average, you get 2.5 months of average window where a movie was in the theater before it went to the small screen. And now they're cutting that down to, in some cases, 2.5 weeks. So super short windows. So any movie that's not doing blockbuster money, theaters have agreed they're only going to give it 2.5 weeks before it goes on to the premium demand where you're like spending, I don't know, like $20, something like that to rent it on your home screen.
Disney Plus or something. I know they did a couple of those.
Yes.
Over the pandemic. The only one for some reason. Yeah, the Mulan. And funny, weirdly, the other one that's coming to me is Trolls World Tour.
Yes, that was like the first.
So
that was like the first VOD success of the pandemic, and that was just because there were a lot of kids stuck at home. Yeah. So the way they will increase the window, I think you alluded to this. If the theater, if the film makes over 50 million, which is not a blockbuster, but it's some good change, they'll increase that window to, I want to say, 5 weekends, to give the theaters more of an opportunity to make the money back. What's crazy about this is that theaters are losing all of their leverage. It used to be that theaters were always so strong on having a long window before anything could go to video. Like back in the day, I don't know, if I was trying to think about this, it could be years before certain movies. Do you remember, the Rocky Horror Picture Show?
Yeah.
Okay. That movie came out in 75. It did not come onto VHS until 1990. That was a 15-year theater window because that movie never left the theaters. People, I know, like where I grew up, every weekend people would go see, or of course, dress up and sing along and do all that stuff. But every weekend, Rocky Horror was still playing in the theater, and they never wanted to compete against that by releasing it on video. So you couldn't get it on video for 15 years unless you got like a bootleg from somebody brought a VHS, handheld into the theater. But anyway, so those times are gone. Theaters have no leverage, and they're just fighting now to be alive. As a matter of fact, let me pull this up here. I pulled some data from Placer AI, which is foot traffic data that we subscribe to. So this is monthly averages of folks all the people that go to AMC theaters. And you can see in April, it just like fell off of a cliff. And since April, we've had this kind of slow and steady increase where month by month, we've been adding 400,000 new people, 800, up to 800,000 new people. Through October, it's still growing. Now, November looks like it's going down, but that's because we're still in November. So we haven't had a full month of November to see yet. But the worry here with theaters is that a lot of states are creeping back into lockdown. And I think it's generally understood that things are going to get better before they get worse. So it's a little bit scary.
I mean, opposite. Things are going to get worse before they get better.
Did I just say?
I was like, I really like your optimism. That's great. But also it's depressing because it's going to get worse. But yeah, you know what really, looking at that chart, and to be fair, we spend a lot of time looking at those Placer and foot traffics and looking at all across all industries. But a lot of them, you at least see half to a 3/4 rebound for a lot of places that we'll look at. And the movie theater one, yes, it's growing. It's better than nothing. But at the same time, that growth is kind of so minimal compared to some of the other sectors that we look at. So that's a rough one.
I think the theaters are just kind of, everybody who's watching the theater scene is just kind of like, winter is going to be a wash. We're just holding out for summer 2021.
Which, James, tell me about all of the different movies. Uh-oh, you might have frozen. No. Well, world, I don't know if you can just see me. James is gone completely. Maybe it's me. I don't know. Bear with us while we still figure out our...
Hey, can you hear me?
Now I can.
Yay.
Just talking to the world. They had to hear me ramble on about live things, which I gotta say, I'd be a terrible newscaster for so many different reasons. Yeah. But at any technical glitch, I'd just be like, live TV people.
Yeah. So anyway, the outlook, I think long-term outlook is good. That we had the announcement from Pfizer and Moderna that their vaccines are 95% effective. The timeline seems to be that the general public, people like you and me, are going to have access to this vaccine in either the spring or summer, which means that's good news for the summer blockbusters. And I think the theaters, a lot of them have been just punting on their blockbusters. Like Tenet was really the only one that's been released, and it didn't do very well. Wonder Woman 1984 keeps getting pushed. It's tentatively for Christmas, but I think that's going to get pushed again. James Bond, which I know you're excited about, No Time to Die, is now coming out, slated for April. And when was that? That one was originally supposed to come out this summer, right? The new
I
James Bond?
think these were all summer blockbusters because especially these types of movies, right? Like, no offense to these movies, they're probably, whatever it is, you want to release your Oscar worthy movies like now-ish, right? Like that's around the holidays, but these big X-Men, Marvel type movies are supposed to come out during the summer. So I think they were all June, July at this point, maybe even earlier.
Yeah. So I am actually, if for the theater chains that have the ability to tap capital in order to stay afloat through this winter, I'm very, very positive about like the future for theater. And one of the reasons why, okay, tell me what you think these three movies have in common. Addams Family, A Bronx Tale, and I don't even know if you know this third movie, Goodbye Lenin. Do you know that one? Any guess as to what those three movies have in common?
Is it going to be movie like they had some of the longest? No, I have no idea.
All right. Well, there's no way you could know. Those are all movies that I went on first dates to. And my point here is that we can never lose movie theaters because first dates are so critical to developing relationships. And movies are perfect for them because you go to the movie, you don't have to talk. You can just sit quietly and you're still having an activity with the person.
And now you can drink.
Well, that's true too, but some of these were way before that age for me. But after the movie, you have something to talk about. So just for the dating life of our future generations, we cannot lose a movie, the movie theaters. Taylor, you got any first date movies?
No, but I just want to say that's really deep. I really like that. And I'm trying to think if I ever went on a first date in a movie, and I don't think I did, but I've definitely gone on dates in a movie, and you're right. You can share popcorn or something. And also it's a good tell. Like if you don't want to share popcorn, we don't have a future together.
Right.
And if you badmouth Twizzlers, I will also be upset. So,
well, I come down heavily on the Red Vines side of the Red Vine Twizzler debate, but I feel like that's a debate for another day.
Fair enough. We can have a whole candy episode. I'm sure there's something there.
Yeah. So Taylor, tell me, what else do you know about retail?
So I've got one that I think is funny. I've got a questionable future of robots.
Okay. Tell me more.
So I think we have heard, this is pre-pandemic too, right? We talk about technology, we talk about robots. I know you've done a couple of videos, and I'm blanking on the restaurant name in San Francisco where a robot will make your pizza, or they'll prep something for you. Itza? Was it Itza?
There was an Itza. I think they've gone out of business. There's a lot of these that are came and went. There was a robot that made burgers. There was one in Boston that made like stir fry called Spice with a Y. I don't know if any of these are still around.
So let's talk about some of the pros. So I feel like people talk about some of this, and some of it's gimmicky, and we've always said this, the gimmicky stuff isn't really here to stay, but the stuff that actually improves operations and efficiency, that's the tech and like the robotics that we'll see. But I read a really interesting article about all of these old school British tailors. So it's Savile Row.
Yes,
apologies for all of our British listeners. I've never been to this place, so I apologize if I mispronounced it. But so these tailors, right, have been on this street for it's what sounds like more than a century. We're talking old school tailors.
Like you, old school tailor.
Thank you. So they've been around for a really long time. Let's talk about what could you like. That's the most hands-on in-person experience. So what do you do when a pandemic hits? Some of them actually created robots to go and like walk around people. Basically, it's a robot with an iPad, but to do measurements. And so people will actually be able to do virtual fittings with some of these tailors. They're also, of course, relying a ton on Zoom and just different kind of consultations. But it's a way to, again, this is, you can go in and spend thousands upon thousands of dollars on suits. So this isn't like, all right, James, like measure like your ankle cuff size, if that's a thing that people do when you get measured for pants. That's not part of this experience.
Cuff size 9. Everybody knows that.
Yeah, that sounds like, totally. But the point is, right? Like, no, I'm not dropping $15,000 on this fancy suit for me to try to measure, anything. So I think that that's a really interesting way they've been able to pivot and stay. I would not say there's no way that that's, a thriving business, but I think it's a really interesting way to use some of this robotics, just technology in general, to stay afloat in such a high touch business. I think that that's, something that's really unique. However, I will also say it's very much temporary. I think this is like a stopgap. We've got a problem. Some people still need suits. It is actually kind of funny hearing the article. There's some, what I have to imagine, extraordinarily wealthy people in Manhattan who called and were like, we cannot wait any longer for our clothes. Like, please let us do some kind of digital, virtual, consultation. So it's certainly for a specific clientele. But I thought that that was a great, super old school way of using technology to your advantage to survive.
So some old school tailors are saying, hello, robot. Is anybody saying goodbye to their robot?
Thank you so much for asking. Yes. Just a few weeks ago, Walmart.
That wasn't planned.
It really wasn't, but I liked it. Walmart is eliminating their in-store robots, which I thought was interesting for a variety of reasons. So they had basically these robots, which maybe some of you have seen it. I know, James, I also think you sent me a picture one time. You were in a mall with a robot, like one of the
the security robot. Yeah.
Security robot. Okay. So, and I think there's like putting them in airports sometimes too, maybe as like a, where can I go and get McDonald's? But Walmart had them, and it was to scan inventory in their stores to figure out, oh, we're running low on Quaker Oats. I scanned this. I tell someone in the back, I guess, and I don't know if another robot brings it out or what. But basically, they found out people do this better. And they are saying, goodbye, robot, which for one, they say, yes, it's for efficiency's sake. People can do it better, which arguably, yes, they can, especially in that scenario. This announcement also came probably about, I think, a month ago. It's a bad look when you are putting in robots in your store during a pandemic when tens and thousands of people have lost their jobs, right? So I think that kind of on a both thing of just like a very literal human level of, oh, yes, no, we couldn't have people do this and they'll do it better and do a good job. So that's just kind of this, yin and yang of robots and where kind of we see the future. And I feel like some people are like, robots are taking over everything. I don't think so. I don't think that that's true at all. I think they'll have their place when it's appropriate, but, goodbye, robot.
Yeah, I mean, when the news first came out that, I forget the name of the company that Walmart was partnering with, I thought for sure this was a thing that in a couple of years we'd have inventory taking robots at every superstore. But yeah, it turns out that with the new COVID protocols, people are out there more restocking shelves and doing things that they can do better and more efficiently than robots. So
yeah,
that's humans 1, robots 0. The rise of the machines is going to have to wait a couple of years.
Yeah, we'll keep that an ongoing. That can be part of our show now. We'll just do an ongoing tally of any time we talk about tech and robots. We'll just see who's winning and see who's losing. That'll be great.
Well, I'm definitely losing because I have daily arguments with, I can't even say her name, starts with an S, and she lives in my phone. And really, I can't tell you, Taylor. I asked the woman in my phone yesterday to set an alarm for 10 a.m. and she set it for 10 p.m. I was cruising into a snoozing when my alarm went off on my phone. I was not happy about that. I mean, come on.
Yeah, no, like that's not okay. That's why I don't talk to her, and that's why I also don't have oh, I
The
can
A.
say it. Yeah, the A. I
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
have
yeah.
her either because I can't. We're good. We'll fight. I'm gonna just remove that and rely on the timer that lives on my oven.
Right. Yeah. Well, we have an Echo, but we only use it as we only use it as speaker, so we leave it unplugged, and then we want to listen to music, we plug it in.
Yeah, I mean, like that's fair. That's totally what I would use that for too. I just also, yeah, it's not for me.
All right, well, Taylor, it's come to the time of the show where we tell folks what else they can get from us out in the world. I want to tell you guys that the latest episode of Where We Buy, which is our podcast about retail and retail real estate, is live. I interviewed Bob Phibbs. He's known as the retail doctor, and he kind of goes in and teaches store associates how to be better at their job. And it's funny, a lot of times when I'm listening back to an interview that I've done with somebody, I'm kind of like zoning out before we release it. This time I was totally engaged and I was like nodding along and laughing at some of the stories that he was telling. So even if you don't work as a retail associate in a store, it's worth checking out the interview with Bob just to see how retailers can do a better job. Of offering customer service that, hey, Taylor, robots still can't do.
I was just about to say, I bet he's not a fan of robots.
He's going to say, goodbye, robot. And then the other thing I wanted to plug is, we mentioned it before, I'm going to be moderating a panel at Center Build. This is a virtual conference, December 2nd through the 4th. If you want to register, just Google ICSC Center Build, and you'll get to the page to register. The keynote speaker is Brian Solis from Salesforce. Rebecca Fitz from Leap is going to be there, and like a ton of other people. There's all these different main sessions and breakouts. If you're in any way involved with retail real estate, it'd be worth checking it out. So Taylor, anything for you to plug?
Yes. So we just released our holiday report. So that is available for download at jll.com. Keisha on our team wrote that report. It's great. A little depressing, but I think that's everything from this year. But I think everyone should take a look because it is different. It's different this year, especially if you read it right after our back to school report, which I get it. It's old now. Everyone's back to school, sort of. But, we saw spending increase for that because everyone had to buy tablets for all of their kids who were doing virtual learning. But spending is down for the holidays. And time will tell what will happen. So you can download that at jll.com. And then there is also the third part of our retail reality webinar, which, James, you have been a speaker for the past 2 times, also with Ryan Severino, our chief economist, and this time David Zoba will also be on. That is December 3rd at 2 p.m. Eastern. There's a very long URL for it, so I recommend Googling JLL Retail Reality Webinar. It will take you to the download page. You can fill out your information, get the calendar invite, and you'll be good to go.
Excellent. Yeah. And David Zoba was the head of real estate at The Gap for many, many years, and has worked at a bunch of other retailers. He's on the board of a REIT, Acadia. So he knows all kinds of stuff. And he's just a font of knowledge. So the point of joining that webinar is to hear what he has to say about how things are going. Awesome. Well, thanks to everybody who joined us live. And those include my mom and dad are here with us live.
Which, quick aside, your dad did say that I did a good job covering the glitch, of which I just didn't realize that there were comments going on. So thank you so much. I very much appreciate it.
Awesome. So Taylor, tell me everything else that you know about retail.
James, I will happily tell you all of it next week.
Awesome. Looking forward to it. Goodbye. You're supposed to wave.
Oh.